Welcome to Live from Somerset Place State Historic Site, which offers you a comprehensive and realistic view of life on a large, and I mean that as a technical term, large North Carolina plantation. My name is Sally Bloom, and I'm really glad you could join us today for this program of the North Carolina Museum of History. I want to begin today with a word of gratitude and some logistics. Thank you to Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina for helping to make this program possible. And remember, if the stream drops today, hang tight, it should come right back up. We have additional resources for you to use available on our website, and they were emailed to you. And we're recording this. It will be a video on demand that you can use at your convenience anytime. And remember to ask questions. Text them in. We'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of the program. You know, we're really fortunate to know a lot about Somerset Place and the people who lived and worked here because of primary sources. And you all know what primary sources are, right? In fact, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to turn to a neighbor and share with them what a primary source is. Ready? Go ahead, turn to your neighbor, tell them about primary sources. You all did it, right? You know that primary sources are created at the time of an event or later by someone who experienced it firsthand and recorded their observations. We often think of primary sources as things like letters and diaries and journals, and those are excellent resources to learn about the past. But primary sources are much more than that. They include buildings, houses are primary sources, gravestones, tombstones, primary sources, portraits, photography, also primary sources. Primary sources are the stuff we use and create every day. Your shoes, my shoes are primary sources. In fact, even the marks of things left in the ground, which archaeologists study, are primary sources as well. And we used all of those kinds of primary sources to learn about Somerset Place. But where are we? You know what? I'm going to grab my umbrella. Where are we today? Well, we're in Washington County. On the edge of Terrell County in northeastern North Carolina on the edge of Lake Phelps. And that's super important because it's a special geography of this place that made Somerset Place come to be. Now, of course, before Somerset Place, before explorers or settlers, there were people here who already knew about the lake and the special land around here. And I'm talking, of course, about the first peoples, American Indians. They knew about Lake Phelps. Lake Phelps is a 16,000 acre oval-shaped shallow lake, the second largest in North Carolina. And it's it's a series of precosins that make up the Carolina Bays. These lakes have lots of swampland around them. There are a lot of undergrowth, giant trees, animals, birds galore, fish, really cool place to come and hunt and fish. And that's exactly what the American Indians did 11,000 years ago. They came to this area generation after generation to hunt and fish, and of course they brought stuff with them while they were camping, left things behind. They even made things here which they left behind. And I'm talking about dugout canoes for them to go fishing on the lake, right? So they would fell the giant cypress trees using fire. And using fire and stone and shells, they would hollow out the top of the logs to create a canoe. Well, they didn't really need to take them with them when they left. So canoes kind of piled up around Lake Phelps, and over time they would get covered by dirt and sediment. And then also over time, gentle waves could remove that dirt and expose the canoes, which is exactly what happened in the 1980s when archaeologists discovered 30-some dugout canoes from this area. They range in age from 600 to 4,000 years old. The longest one we found is 37 feet long. That was a really tall tree. And that's just a really amazing find from peoples long ago. We're fortunate to have one of those canoes on display at the museum in Raleigh in the Story of North Carolina, which I hope you can visit sometime. So when settlers came, let's think about this. Indians were here, they're hunting, they're fishing, but then what changed? Well, what changed was settlers and explorers arrived, and they brought with them diseases to which American Indians had very little, if no, immunity at all. And many, many of them died from diseases, including many of the Algonquians, who were the people here coming to the lake area to fish and hunt. And it seemed like over time, knowledge of the lake kind of was lost. But according to tradition, in 1755, some European men came to the area, hunting probably. Mr. Tarkington, well, he climbed this tall tree and he looked out and he saw this huge body of water really close by. And he yelled down to his friend, Mr. Phelps, "Hey, there's some water up there." So Mr. Phelps ran ahead, jumped in the lake, remember it's really shallow, and declared the right to name it, Lake Phelps, right? And we can see evidence of this kind of lost knowledge and regained knowledge on a primary source. I'm talking about maps, awesome primary sources. If we look at a 1733 map of North Carolina, we put a question mark on it where Lake Phelps should be. Now we know the lake existed, but it wasn't on the map. Then if we look at a map from 1800 of North Carolina, boom, there's Lake Phelps. It's not like it just was invented, it's just when it was recorded and cartographers recorded it on a map, a primary source. Now these guys in 1755, they thought this was a fun place to come camping and hunting, but they didn't really think of it as a place to develop. But if we go forward to 1785, less than 10 years after the Declaration of Independence was written, 3 guys in Edenton did think this was a good place to develop. And Edenton's pretty close by here, and one of these men was Mr. Josiah Collins, who's from Somersetshire in England. Get it? Somersetshire, Somerset Place, that's where the name comes from. They wanted to cultivate rice, harvest timber, make this a real business concern. But to do that, they realized they would have to get those products inland from the lake to somewhere to market. So they needed a way to do that, and water was the best way. So they wanted a transportation canal. We're actually walking by Somerset Place's transportation canal, which was hand dug, completed in 1788. It goes for 6 miles, and until the 1920s was the main way to get anything in from the lake inland. Think about the kind of tools they had to have. Not super advanced tools in the 1780s to dig this huge canal. Now, of course, these 3 gentlemen did not plan to dig the canal, cultivate the rice, or harvest the timber themselves. For that, they needed labor. So they brought in enslaved labor. By 1790, there were 161 enslaved men, women, and children, overseers, and other workers here at this place doing all kinds of work. But no owner was living here. Eventually, Mr. Collins owned the property himself. So that for 40 years, this was a business concern, over 40 years, with lots of activity going on here. And then, if we go to 1830, Josiah Collins III, who's the grandson of Mr. Collins, maybe he saw the lake, and he decided, you know what, I'd like to build a house here. So he did. He got married, he built the house, and became the family home for the Collins family for 30 years. They built a large house, a mansion, and that's where we're going to start our exploration of Somerset Place today. So it went from just being a business concern to being a family home and a landed large plantation owner estate in North Carolina. Today we're going to begin at the mansion, and like I said, we're going to do what most of us do when we go somewhere. We're going to go in the front door. Now you may think that's pretty usual, but it's important here to note that the only people who could go in the front door had to be invited. If you were not an invited guest of the Collins family, you weren't going in the front door. So let's give it a try and see if we can get in the front door of the Collins mansion. I don't think I need this anymore. I'm going to put this away. Cool umbrella. Let's go on in. All right, here's the front door. I'm going to give it a knock. Hopefully we can all go in. Hello.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Somerset Place.
Thanks. May we come in?
Sure.
All right, I'm going to wipe my feet. Come on in. Get the door. So joining us today to help tell the stories of Somerset Place is Karen Hayes, who is the site manager of this historic site. Thank you so much for having us to visit.
You're welcome.
Wow, this is really impressive. So tell me, where are we? What are we looking at?
We're inside the Collins home, the home to Josiah Collins III and his family. And it's a Great Revival style home.
Okay.
And even by modern day standards, the size of the home is impressive. There's 6,809 square feet of living space. There's 3 floors, and there's 14 rooms. So the size of the house relates to the wealth of the family. And most people who live in antebellum North Carolina live in smaller homes, usually 1 to 2 room houses, including tenant farmers and enslaved people. The enslaved community lived in less space, and 188 members lived in less space than it was inside the Collins house.
Wow, so the enslaved community at Somerset lived in less space than the family members here in this house. I'm sorry, I just have to say that again.
That's
That's
correct.
kind of overwhelming to me. Wow, this is a really big, impressive place. Can we look in some of the spaces?
Sure, we'll take a look inside the parlor.
So I was talking, Karen, that technically, it's a technical term to say a plantation is large. What does that mean exactly, a large plantation?
Well, the plantation itself, as far as the land, it covered 100,000 acres.
100,000 acres.
And it had over 800 enslaved people throughout the 80-year span of life of the plantation from 1785 to 1865. And that's another status of wealth, is the number of enslaved people owned. So within the state of North Carolina, it was the third largest slaveholding plantation by 1860.
And so that's the definition of large, is the number of enslaved people that
Yes.
you hold. Okay, all right. So we're going to go in this room and take a look. Oh, this is lovely. Absolutely beautiful. Where are we? What are we looking at?
This room is the parlor, and holding music recitals and reading circles was a frequent activity for the Collins family. And those activities would have taken place in this particular room. And the Collins boys they were all trained to play the piano.
Oh, wow. Okay, how many children did they have?
The Collinses had 6 sons.
6 sons. Okay, all right. So they're playing music, entertaining guests. And I see another space back here, yet another room. And I see books. Books everywhere. Is
Yes.
that something to do with this room, I'm guessing?
Yes, this is the library, and the wealthy class was the only true literate class during the antebellum period, and that would include physicians, attorneys, teachers, and ministers. And having the luxury of these many books, again, establishes the wealth. Most antebellum households owned perhaps a family Bible, but the Collins family owned over 3,000 books, and they would have been located in this room and throughout the home.
Wow. So most families, 1 book. The Collins family, 3,000. That's very impressive. All right. There's got to be more to see. Can we go somewhere else?
Sure, we'll take a look at the office, which is right across the hall.
Okay, so the office, that sounds like a workspace for sure.
Yes.
Another large, lovely room, spacious room, and wow, lots of things going on. What's going on in here?
This is where most of the business aspects of the plantation took place. Wealthy planters had kept very, very meticulous records. Josiah Collins III kept records of the crops in each field, the sales and yield price of those crops, personnel records, the overseer's pay, but he also lists the number, age, gender, and value of each enslaved person here on the plantation. And they were valued based upon their skills. And for a wealthy planter, enslaved people was one of the most valuable property that he owned other than land.
Okay, I can see here lots of documents out. Are these originals?
These are actually copies of the originals, which are in state archives.
Yeah, I wouldn't think we'd really leave that old primary sources around, but I do know we have here records from the overseer, like you said, the list of enslaved people, and I know there's even a pass that enslaved people would have to receive to travel. They couldn't just go off and visit people if they wanted. Is that correct?
Yes, he allows some of the enslaved community here, because he owned properties in Edenton, which is about 30 miles north of here, to travel to visit relatives during the Christmas holiday. And we have indication actually right here. It's a copy of in 1838.
Okay, all right. Well, maybe we'll hear more about that later. So looking around, I know there's a lot of upkeep to make a place like this run, and I'm assuming the Collins family really weren't doing it themselves, right? So
No.
where was some of this work going on? Can we see that?
Well, actually, some of that work took place right here in the butler's pantry, the next room over. We'll take a closer look.
Yeah, let's see this. Oh, wow. Okay, so what kind of work is going on here?
This is the butler's pantry, which is part of the service area. Once the food was cooked in the Collins kitchen, it was brought over by the cooks to the butler's pantry. The butler would then place it on platters or even food warmers, or take it directly to the dining room to be served. This room was also used by the house servants to wait in when they were on call to serve the Collins family. The fine china, the silverware was washed down in this room.
Okay, so food cooked outside of the house, brought into here, made real foo-foo. Servants here waiting to be on call all the time. And then where did the food go?
The food went next door, next room over to the butler's pantry. But I also want to point out the servers porch area. This was also part of the service area along with the exterior steps. It was used to carry clean, dirty laundry, chamber pots, so they wouldn't have to use the interior steps.
All right, so let's go from the butler's pantry to the dining room where we can see you. All right, let's go. I'll let you lead the way. Oh my, this is amazingly impressive, absolutely beautiful and huge. Could put a lot of people in here. So tell me about this space.
This is the dining room, which was truly the domain of Mary Collins, Josiah's wife. One of the roles of a wealthy planter's wife was to entertain and to make these memorial events when they had balls and formal dinners here. You were actually in the room for 3 to 4 hours. 4 to 6 courses were served. So Mary wanted this room to be aesthetically pleasing to your eye. She would cut fresh flowers from the formal garden or use flowers from the nearby greenhouse. She selected the patterns of china, linen, tablecloths, and also selected the menu.
Oh, okay.
She looked for recipes in Harper's periodicals, which the family subscribed to, and also writing family members to obtain recipes. So at the end of the evening, all the compliments or the criticisms belonged to Mary, not to Josiah. So that was her role as a wealthy planter's wife.
I see. So really, really quite the way she demonstrated who she was in society. So did the kids sit here for 3 hours?
No.
That would be hard.
The children, the boys here, they took their meals in at the Colony House.
Okay.
During the antebellum period, wealthy families, their children usually ate separate from the family at another table or at a different time.
Okay, all right. But still, I guess they were raised to know this was the way their life was going to be, so it didn't seem that out of the ordinary that mom and dad were eating for 3 hours when they were entertaining guests.
That's true.
Times. All right, let's take a peek and see what's out here. Oh, right, you said there were 3 floors, and I see some stairs. These are beautiful. Is this marble?
Actually, this is a faux marbleizing technique. It was completed originally by Richard Barfield. He was a free black painter.
Okay.
He lived in Edenton, North Carolina, and he painted the baseboards of the staircase and the steps to spruce up the house when Josiah IV to prepare for his wedding in December 1859. So he actually started working on this in April 1859.
Okay, so Josiah Collins III is who built the mansion, and it was his son who was getting married. They wanted to make everything even more pretty than it was. Wow, that's really impressive. He did an amazing job because it totally does fool the eye. You know, we can't get upstairs today with all the cords and stuff, but we were able to visit here recently and recorded some video upstairs, and take a look at this and see what you can learn about the upstairs of the Collins family mansion. 4 family and guest bedrooms are on the 2nd floor of the house. Although Josiah and Mary were the only permanent residents on this floor, often every bedroom was filled to capacity with family members or friends who stayed for months. The large linen cabinet in the hallway held all of the summer and winter bedding, including mosquito netting for the family and friends. For more than 5 years, Josiah Collins' younger sister Alethea considered Somerset Place her home. This was her room. She was 15 when her father died, and she came to live here with her brother until she reached maturity. Mary and Josiah used this bedroom. The bed, washstand, and dresser in the room are original pieces of furniture given to Somerset Place by family descendants. 3rd floor was the domain of the Collins boys and the only free black woman who lived and worked on the plantation, Charlotte Cabarrus. You can see the formal garden from the window going up the stairs. The Collins family hired Charlotte Cabarrus, a free woman of color, in 1838 as a nursemaid for the boys. They called her Shishi. This was her room. The boys slept in the bedroom at the end of the hall. When they were old enough to begin their formal education, they moved into the Colony House, along with their tutors and a resident minister. The other room was the boys' playroom. According to oral history, when the playroom was no longer needed, it became Charlotte Cabarrus's room. Karen, thanks again for showing us the Collins family mansion. It's really amazing to think how few people live this way, but it's so amazing to get to see it. So you know how we came in the door that only invited people could use? Well, we're exiting the door that everybody else used. Enslaved people, overseers, merchants, they all used this door, and as Karen said, this porch and these stairs to access the Collin Mansion. Really a big separation in the class structure at the time. So I want to get reoriented where we are. Came out of this way of the Collins Mansion. I know the transportation canal is right behind us. The lake is right over there. So did children in this time period play in water like we do today? Did they think about that?
Yes, they did. And you mentioned the canal. The canal actually was used as a recreational outlet for the Collins boys as well as the lake. In February of 1843, Edward and Hugh Collins, along with their slave playmates, Zacharias and Anderson, were canoeing in the canal, and it overturned and all 4 boys drowned.
Oh, that is so tragic.
Yes,
so
it
all
is.
4 boys, the Collins sons and their enslaved playmates,
Yes.
all died. Wow, I know that affected the family forever. How can it not? Very,
Yes.
very tragic. So yeah, that is striking. And you told me that the family lived here, but I have to believe for everybody else at Somerset that it was really a different way of life from what we saw here.
Mm-hmm.
As we're going by this is not where enslaved people would live, right?
No, these are actual buildings in which they would have worked in.
Okay, so buildings work in. And so the enslaved community here, they weren't just farmers, right? They had all kinds of skills?
Yes, there were skilled artisans, craftsmen of every skill here, blacksmiths, carpenters, joiners, that would have worked here at Somerset Place.
And what were some of the jobs that women would do?
Some of the women were field hands as well, rolling logs out of newly cleared fields, picking insects off of the crops,
Okay.
Cleaning out drainage ditches in off seasons. And then, of course, there were 25 house servants, including cooks, butlers, the coachman, Wellington Roberts. They would have worked here.
Wow, okay. So is this one of the outbuildings that we're standing with?
No, this is actually the Colony House. It's a boarding school.
Oh, okay. So this is where you're saying the sons would be once they were old enough to have tutors.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So they, I guess they could stay at the house but come over here for lessons?
Yes, they actually moved over and lived here with their tutor
Okay.
and the Episcopal minister of the Lake Chapel, the Episcopal Church, Reverend George Patterson. They live here, but at each night, 26 dogs made platform at the very top of the staircase.
I'm sorry. Hang on just a second. Did you just say 26 dogs?
Yes,
Were in this house with the boys, the tutor, the priest?
yes, 26 plot hound dogs.
Bloodhounds, that's a state dog. You all know that, right? It wasn't the state dog then, but it is the
No.
state dog now. So they had 26 dogs as well, and we know that from some primary sources, right?
That's correct. It was noted in a letter that was written by George Patterson to his sister, and he was complaining about the odor of the dogs.
Shocking that you would complain about 26 dogs in your house. Wow, that's pretty amazing. Okay, so we did talk about the outbuildings and all the work that was done there, and we can't visit them live today, but we did get to visit them recently, and we recorded some of the things we saw. So take a look at this, and we'll see you in just a moment. The Somerset kitchen was used exclusively to prepare meals for the Collins family, their invited guests, and the enslaved community. Every antebellum cook, however, regardless of race or legal status, used the cooking wares and methods seen in this kitchen. The work was hot, cumbersome, and could be dangerous. Most people in antebellum North Carolina washed and changed their clothing infrequently. Clothing was designed so that only a few items needed to be washed regularly, like men's collars and vests. Typically, only wealthy people wore ironed clothing. For the most part, washing clothing and household items was an outdoor activity. The materials needed to meet the Collins family laundry were stored in this room, the laundry. Today, we package and store staples and fruits in paper and plastic containers that fit on pantry or cabinet shelves. During the 1840s, everything grown, purchased, shipped, and stored was done so in bulk, using wooden boxes and crates, barrels, and burlap bags. Most households did not have the need for or luxury of a separate building to house food items. However, at Somerset Place, the kitchen rations building was stocked and full at all times. Around 200 hogs were killed each December at Somerset Place to provide a year's supply of meat for everyone on the plantation. Packing meat and salt helped preserve it in a time of no refrigeration. The salting house held a large amount of lamb, pork, beef, and fish consumed by the family. The louvers redirected sunlight and helped keep the building cool year-round. Some meats and fish were smoked to preserve them. pork hams and shoulders hung in this building, the smokehouse, all year. It had 3 horseshoe hearths where aromatic leaves were burned on hot coals to create a distinctive aroma and flavor. In 1839, Josiah Collins wrote that he had 434 hams on hand. The dairy was built to store perishables such as butter, eggs, cheese, milk, and lard, used by the Collins family. Butter churns were also stored and likely used here. Enslaved brick masons insulated the building with brick noggin, which was designed to retain heat or cool, whichever was desired. In the case of the dairy, consistently cool air was needed. The louvered walls served to keep direct sunlight out and to admit the breezes from the lake and the colder north winds. All right, we've come quite a way from the Collins Mansion and the Colony House. We've come down the path, and we've discovered Noah Janis, who's here. He's a site interpreter here at Somerset. Thank you so much for being here to let us talk to you and ask you questions. So, like, where are we and what's going on here?
Yeah, so we are standing in the enslaved community, which by the 1840s consisted of 26 dwellings, including 23 of the 1.5-story structures behind us here.
All right, and so where were the enslaved people from? Where did they find them?
So the original enslaved population consisted of 80 native Africans who were forcibly brought here in 1786. The enslaved population would then continue to grow with African Americans, so people who were at least first generation born in the Americas, purchased and sent to the plantation.
So was that usual in North Carolina to bring enslaved people directly from Africa to North Carolina?
It was not. It was very unusual for the time period for a slave owner to send his own ship to Africa to do that, but absolutely devastated those families.
Oh, of course, for generations. And how do we know about these people, these Africans from
So
the
original businessmen kept a ledger documenting all the transactions associated with that voyage, so we're able to know more information about that trip as a result.
All right. Well, again, primary sources help keep people alive for us. So what can you tell us about this place, and can we go inside?
Yeah, come on in.
Oh, great, thank you.
So in 1843, the house that stood here would have been home to Judy and Lewis, 4 of their unmarried teenage children, Judy's adult son Francis, his wife Violet, and their infant son Howard. So 9 people were living in the house that stood here. And Judy was actually the daughter of one of the enslaved native Africans, a woman named Duco.
So she was just a first generation born here in North Carolina. Wow,
Yes.
So 9 people here, Collins family in 6,000 square feet.
Yes.
That's quite the difference.
It is.
Quite a difference. All right. Wow. And so how do we know about Judy and Lewis? How do you know all this information? Because you were naming specific names. That's pretty impressive. No, I got to tell you.
Yeah, we are. Yeah. So there was an inventory that was compiled in 1843 that listed the names and ages of all the enslaved people at that time, and also tells us exactly where they lived. And so that's how we know who lived in this dwelling at that time.
So when they could come together at the end of the workday, this would be their family time, their community time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was time
to maintain.
Yeah, for them just in the middle of the night was the only time they had.
The middle of the night.
Yeah.
Wow. It's really almost impossible to imagine for us today.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we interpret this, that we share this information with people. Should we take a look and see what else is?
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
All right,
Let's head outside.
Let's head back out. So you said there were 26 dwellings for enslaved people. So I guess the cabins went on this way. Is that right? They went on down that way?
Yes, about a quarter mile down along the original lake shore.
And we're going to head back this way. So I got to believe some things are missing. What would we have been seeing here?
Yeah, so right in front of us, we would be able to see the other 2-story dwellings. There would have been 3 of them. One of them has been reconstructed. You can also see the reconstructed overseer's house down there by the parking lot. And then beyond that would have been the barnyard area, which encompassed a 4.5-story barn for all of the crops.
Whoa, 4.5 stories. Did you, a 4.5-story barn?
Yes,
Not just a barn with a hayloft?
No, yeah, the massive structure had its own elevator. It was huge, yeah.
It had an elevator?
Yes.
Not like an elevator day where you go in and you push a button, right?
Not exactly. It was water powered.
Water powered. Oh, wow, that's impressive. Quite a lot of engineering going on.
Yes.
Okay, so we're coming up on one of the 2-story dwellings. That was 1.5, like a loft?
Correct.
All right. And so what can you tell us about this space?
Yeah, so the house that stood here would have had 26 enslaved people living in it in the 1840s, including the family of Suki Davis, who we'll get to talk more about inside.
Okay, so I'm sorry, 26 people here?
Yes.
Okay. And so this was divided into 4 rooms, like 4 family compartments. Is that how it was organized?
Yes, yeah. So each room was considered to be its own house. So on average, about 7 people were living in each of the rooms in these 2-story dwellings here.
7 people in each room. All right, we have to see this. Can
Yes.
we go inside?
Yep, come on in.
Thank you. All right, so this is the home for 7 people, and you said it was belonged to, or certainly didn't belong to, right? Because enslaved people can own their property.
Correct.
But Suki Davis lived here. What do we know about Suki Davis?
Yeah, so Suki Davis was one of the first enslaved African American women on this plantation. She was purchased from Edenton at about 14 years old. At which point she then came to this plantation, was forced to work as a field hand, but also started a family. She had 8 children through 2 different partners. And so by the 1840s, she was a grandmother and ultimately would have 131 direct descendants born into slavery on this plantation. So she had one of the largest families here.
Wow, that is quite a community that she created within here.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing. And she had lots of different types of work over time, and I think she started looking after other children when she became older, is that right?
Yeah, so as she was too old to be able to work in the fields, her responsibilities shifted. So she was taking care of the children who were deemed too young to work a full day, so younger kids, 8, 9, and less. So she was teaching them cultural traditions, passing down oral history, but also teaching them how to avoid punishments and be able to break the rules through acts of defiance.
And I know we have some primary sources that speak to this. Is there something specifically about Suki that speaks to your knowledge of her?
Yeah, so we have a couple documents listing Suki, including her original bill of sale, where she was purchased for 60 pounds. We also have lists of her family and her children in the 1820s, and then ultimately that 1843 list we mentioned, which tells us that she was living in the house that stood here.
I have to look behind you and get a closer look at this object here. You talked about Suki. What would be some of the lessons you think she might? Yeah, go ahead, Karen. Show me what is that? Tell us, is this something about their community?
This is actually a gourd drum. It's made with animal skin on top, and this was part of their cultural heritage. Gourds were used heavily within the enslaved community: bowls, water dippers, musical instruments, and they grew them in the vegetable patches behind their homes.
So it was food, and then they could also use it for storage, and then even a cultural object like that. So what are some of the things Suki would have been teaching her children and grandchildren, do you think?
Yeah, so beyond the cultural traditions, she would be teaching them how to avoid punishments from the overseers, but then also how to break all the rules on this plantation. So things like breaking and entering, stealing, even possibly trying to escape to freedom.
Right, so it was much more than just, here's how to get along. Here's how to get along and survive.
Exactly.
Important. Are there other places we can see today?
Yes, there's another important building we'd like to take a look at, which is the hospital.
All right, let's head out that way and see. It's really striking to me what you were saying about Suki, and I assume that all the enslaved people here, it seems to me very clearly that the enslaved community here had a lot of pride in their work, even if it was for other people, because they're human, right? And sometimes you just want to do the best you can. And they learned a lot of trades and skills, but at the same time, they were working really hard to maintain community and to pass on opportunities to maybe defy their state of enslavement. And it just sounds like it was a very challenging way to live moment to moment, day to day, that it's hard to kind of wrap your head around that today. All right, so we're coming up on another. It looks similar to the other buildings, but you're telling me this was a hospital.
Yeah, this is a hospital, and it was used to treat ill members of the slave community because that was important, because their labor ungirded the prosperity of the plantation.
Okay, all right. Hey, and we're joined by Krista Hobbit, who's the Assistant Site Manager here at Somerset Place. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you
for sharing your time with us today. What do you want to tell us about this building we're looking at, which is a primary source?
It is a primary source. It is a reconstructed building here at our site today. So it's a 2-story, 4-room hospital here within the enslaved community along the street. And so this was, again, as Karen just mentioned, strictly for the enslaved community here at Somerset Place. The same physicians the Collins family hired for themselves, those physicians would go to them at their house, but those were the same physicians that also came from time to time here to the hospital as well to treat the enslaved people here.
Can we see inside?
Definitely, come on in.
All right, let's go see. feel really bad that I'm not wiping my feet as much as I should today.
Don't worry about that. We're used to that.
Wow, this
here.
is an artifact-rich space.
Very much so.
I'm gonna get a closer look at some of these things. Krista, tell me what I'm looking at here.
All right, so here at the end of the table, you are looking at a physician's surgical kit. So many tools here.
Scary.
It is unfortunately. But we have to remember this, the equipment we see here on these tables is all cutting edge medical technology for this 1840s time period. And so this is the exact, these tools are from that time period, and so this is what they had.
That is a teeth. Yeah. We're looking at teeth.
That is a dentistry kit here. We do know, according to some of our primary sources, ledger entries, things like that, that dentists were hired to come out here and treat enslaved people, and a lot of other medical equipment
I gotta take a closer look at one other thing here. This is one of my favorite things, a leach jar.
Yes, a lot of people notice that right away when they come in.
Absolutely. And I think people who use my distance learning classes know that sometimes you still use leeches today. Is that right?
Do. They do in hospitals for, I've been told anyway, for burn patient units.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so it sounds like the Collins were very careful to invest in keeping their slaves healthy.
Correct.
Because that's money to them, right?
Exactly right, yes. If an enslaved person is not healthy, is not doing the work that they can do, the Collins family are losing money. So it's all financially motivated by the Collins family to have this hospital here, yeah.
It makes more sense to me now, because at first you said a hospital for the enslaved people, like, but it does make sense when you think of it as an economic investment.
Exactly right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I see some things here on the beds.
Yes.
That, wow, those look a lot like, I don't know,
Our boots.
casks.
Yeah, they do,
Right,
don't they?
right. I
Yeah,
get that
so
word
like a
out.
boot, yeah, I know, I do that too. So these are called fracture boxes. So these were used for broken bones. So this would have been a lower leg, shin, those types of bones down there. And so it will immobilize the leg to allow those bones to start healing properly. But if you take a look at it, you can see, I mean, it's not...
You're not hopping around on this.
No, you're not. You're not moving. You were bedridden for the duration while the bones were healing. So broken bones, we know today, you know, they take 4 to 6 to 8 weeks or so to heal properly. And when we are bedridden for this length of time,
You're getting weaker.
You're getting weaker. Your muscles are getting weaker, and then other complications arise in this healing process. Can and do. So broken bones during this 1840s time period was a potentially life-threatening event for people of all classes, actually.
So again,
at that
want a
point.
good treatment for that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we were in the mansion, we were looking at some of the passes that the Collins could write for enslaved people.
Correct,
To
yeah.
travel at holidays, and I think there's a story in
There
conjunction with
is.
one of them. Can you share that story with
Yeah,
us?
definitely.
It's
So
a great primary source story.
definitely a good primary source story. Rebecca Drew. She was an enslaved woman here in the 1840s through the end of the Civil War. And in the 1840s, mid-1840 time period, she was a teenager and had been separated from her mother, from her family, and was forced to work here at this plantation. But so she did. She tried to escape to freedom, tried to escape to get back to her family. Unfortunately, was caught in that process by patrollers in the area and brought back to the plantation. For her attempt to escape to freedom, she was punished by one of the overseers here, Joseph Newberry. He put her in the stocks. And so a very uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable form of punishment. But the thing about this is this was done in December.
Okay.
And so it was very, very cold outside.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
It's February.
Exactly, yeah. And unfortunately, she was left locked in the stocks overnight. And so by morning, when she was released, it was discovered severe frostbite had set into both of her feet. And so she was brought here to the hospital. A physician was called in to check in and see what could be done for Rebecca at that point in time. And it was discovered, he decided that he had to amputate both of her feet in order to save her life.
So she had to remove them, amputate is to remove.
Exactly. Yes, exactly right. So cut off. So he would have been using one of these pieces of equipment here at the end of the table called a amputation knife or a bone saw. And so that's what he would have used. Now Rebecca survived that, which is actually very remarkable.
It is.
Surviving both the surgery and the healing process for the recovery. She did go on to get married. She had a few children, and she lived to gain her freedom at the end of the Civil War.
Whoa.
So thankfully, her story does have a more happy ending. and the fact that she has a family, she has her freedom, and then she was able to live the rest of her life with her family in freedom in the town of Edenton.
And that's
after
just
that point.
one person's story.
Exactly.
We know from primary sources.
Yes.
And what a story of resilience.
Exactly right. Exactly
Incredible
right.
resilience. She had that drive to be with family, and it put her in the stocks. But then eventually she survived and had her family.
Exactly.
Made her family.
Yeah,
That's
she
amazing.
did. Yeah.
I know there's got to be a lot more stories here, but
There
I also
are.
know there's going to be some questions coming in from
definitely.
students. So
I'd love
let's
to
head
do that.
out and
Sure.
see. And so I'm going to try to do a quick summary of a lot of history, and you're going to correct me when I get it wrong.
Why not?
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So what happened to Somerset Place? What happened to all the people here? All right, let's see if I can do this. Everybody knows that the Civil War was from 1861 to 1865, and that North Carolina took the side of the Confederacy and left the Union. In July of 1861, Union forces were not too far away from here. They were close enough to frighten the Collins family into moving and leaving. And so they traveled behind Confederate lines a couple hundred miles inland toward Hillsborough, where they stayed at the Burwell.
Yeah.
Say it?
Burwell.
Yeah, that word. School for ladies, which eventually a member of the family bought, and they named it the Beehive. I got to believe there's a lot of activity there between students, family, everything. So fast forward a year, July 1862, Union forces come here to get supplies, to gather up supplies and take what they wanted. So at that point, the Collins family very quickly removed as many enslaved people as they could to keep them from leaving and joining the Union. So they apparently, supposedly, according to legend, threw the silver in a well or in the overseer house somewhere. Never been found. One of these people have not found it, right?
No,
Nobody
not
has
yet.
the silver. Okay, but they, tragically did separate families, took enslaved people behind Confederate lines. They even bought a new plantation, which they named aptly Hurry Scurry, left them there. Meanwhile, overseers and other people, about 60 enslaved people, were left here to keep things going. 1863, Josiah Collins III had died. His wife Mary had a stroke, so she wasn't doing that well. The war ends in 1865. Mary, the mom, and her son Josiah Collins IV, you got all these Josiahs, right?
Yes.
Comes back, and they try to make a go of things, but now they have to pay for labor, right? They're
Yeah.
not enslaved anymore. They can't afford to pay the labor, and the enslaved people may want to go off and reunite with families. By 1870, they're all gone. Eventually, this property is sold, and then years down the road becomes part of a state park and then a state historic site.
Yep.
I think. Okay,
That's pretty much covers it. Yeah. Well done.
My work here is done. So I do know, I've heard that eventually, so we talked about the number of enslaved people that were here over time, over 800 in the whole history of it, 180 some here at the time of the Civil War, and of course they had children and children and children, descendants. And it's my understanding that at some point Dorothy Redford is a descendant of an enslaved community, and she did a lot of research, and she created something here. What happened? Can you tell me that story?
Yes, she actually completed 10 years of research, and with that research, she not only researched her family history, but the lineage of other enslaved people that were here at Somerset Place. And she started a event called Somerset Homecoming, and the first one was held in 1986, Labor Day weekend, and then it was periodically held, and the last one was in 2001, Festival of Families and Friends.
Very neat. So I assume descendants' families can still come here and
do.
regather? They do that?
Yeah.
Yes, we periodically have reunions of the enslaved community families to come here and visit and gather on the grounds and do tours and other activities.
Yeah.
So they're kind of reclaiming this place for their own.
Yes.
And, we made this place, and they're reclaiming it, and I think that's really amazing. All right, so we have time for questions, if you've been texting your questions in. And while we get those first questions up, I do want to remind everybody that Somerset Place, first of all, come visit.
Yes.
Okay, second of all, they've got a great website. Third of all, they have an amazing YouTube channel. Okay, so I forgot to do this. I'm going to give Jessica that. They have a really good YouTube channel. They have all kinds of cool series on history, mystery of artifacts, missing buildings,
Yes.
site history. We're all getting rained on. This is fun, but you're worth it. Okay, do we have any questions out there? And again, I'm going to interject here. I want to thank Noah and Krista and Karen. You have been so welcoming to us. We've come in, we've disrupted your world, but we're bringing this live to you.
Yeah.
So do we have any questions?
We do. Our first question is from St. Thomas More in Chapel Hill. How many acres in all is Somerset Place?
Today,
Today it's 31 acres, but originally it consisted of 100,000 acres, and that included a 6,000 square foot lake, along with all the land that you see here today.
that is massive. I can't even imagine. I got to believe a lot of that was overgrown with
it's
forests
densely
and stuff.
wooded,
Right.
yeah.
But I think as far as we could see this way would have been fields.
Fields this way and a little bit that way as well. Yeah.
What's another question?
All right, David from Lincoln Elementary would like to know how many people lived on the plantation? Do you have an estimate what the height of population would have been?
Do you want to get?
Yeah, so in 1860, there were 328 enslaved people who lived and worked here, along with a number of white employees, 2 free black employees, and then also the 8 members of the Collins family.
It's quite a community.
All right, we've got a question from Mills River School. Were the Collins involved in the Eatonton Tea Party?
Not that we're aware of.
Let's gather up, huddle up. We're really tight. That's a good question because we are really close to Eatonton.
Our next question is it common for most plantations to have a hospital?
No, that is not common, but Josiah Collins recognized the importance of the enslaved community here, labor, and they wanted to keep them healthy. So you won't find plantations that have hospitals on site, although they did hire doctors to come to their plantations to treat ill members of their slave communities. But Somerset Place is unique in that aspect.
Yeah.
All right, our next question is, in the enslaved people's houses, where did everyone sleep? It looked small.
It was small. So some of the enslaved people would have slept on beds, and then others, children most likely, would have had straw mats pulled out from under a bed that was on the floor.
I wonder if they slept outside at any time because of heat, but then I know you've got the mosquitoes, right?
Yeah. So there is we do believe they probably, especially in the summer with the heat, right, extended their living space outside to take advantage of the cooler night air, for sure.
And would that have been the same for the Collins family? Were those porches on the mansion sleeping porches?
Well, they could have used mosquito netting and slept on the porches, but the house was designed with cross ventilation with the Greek Revival style architecture. The doors and windows are across from each other, so once those doors and windows were all open, it created a cross ventilation of cool air.
All right, the next question is, who built the mansion? Was it Jonathan Collins III or the first?
Josiah.
So the Collins home was built for Josiah Collins III, although who exactly was building the structure itself, we don't know, unfortunately. We haven't been able to find those records, but it would have been a combination of enslaved and free white artisans.
Yeah.
So you haven't yet located like the building plans or a...
Correct, yeah. Unfortunately, those records have been lost as far as we're aware.
So that's a part of primary sources we haven't really talked about. It's amazing when you have them, but you also know where there are holes and gaps and you wish you could find more, but you haven't stopped looking, I'm sure.
Oh,
Research
periodically
keeps going, right?
Oh, it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was the canal the only type of transportation used, or did they also have roads?
There were, the canal was 6 miles long that went to the mouth of the Scuppernong River, and then they would have used boats. But also there were trails throughout the property, and they would use boats to go over to Eatonton, and ships were used to actually transport crops and items to and from the property.
All right, our last question is there a record or a primary source of the first enslaved member at the plantation?
Unfortunately, there is not in terms of the names. Now, we know it would have been those 80 enslaved Native Africans who we talked about were brought in 1786, but it wasn't for many years that the first inventory was compiled, so we only know about 15 names from those 80 people.
And so I had a question for you. I feel like I read in a primary source somewhere that the enslaved peoples here carried on a tradition that is really rare and unique, and it's called John Canoe. Can anybody speak to that? And I know I'm putting you on the spot. Is that true?
John
Not true?
Canoe, John Coonering, it's an event that's found in a lot of coastal towns in northeastern North Carolina. It was held here at Somerset Place during the December holiday season here. Josiah Collins allowed some of the enslaved people days of rest, and they created the John Canoe here. It was also in Edenton and New Bern, North Carolina, and it would consist of a member of the enslaved community, usually a male, just dressed in animal furs and feathers and things to distort his appearance. And they would use drums, and they would parade around the plantation and go to each building. And at each building, those residents would give them gifts of some sort. So that was an activity that took place here at Somerset Place.
Yeah. And really, really special to North Carolina. And it was kind of a time when they could come out or shift the power structure a little bit.
Yeah.
Just for
Yeah.
that time.
That
Pretty
one
amazing.
moment, yeah.
Wow. So thank you so much for all of your questions and for being with us today. I hope you all remember, again, check out Somerset Place online on their YouTube channel. Remember, you are a primary source, all right? And every single day, with your choices, your words, and your actions, you make history too. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.